Father, suffering, Vivian! The shrill cry tore through the mansion's silence, coming from the winged shadow Arthur called Corvus. Arthur, the millionaire who had the world at his feet, felt a chilling shiver down his spine. It was impossible. His raven didn't speak, but the words, laden with unspeakable pain, echoed in his mind as he ran in desperation to his father's isolated room, a place his wife Vivian insisted was a safe haven for old Elias. What Corvus was desperately trying to reveal about his beloved wife and the state of the man who raised him was about to shatter his reality. Arthur, his heart pounding in his chest, hurried through the opulent corridor, each step echoing the urgency Corvus had instilled. The image of his father, Elias, frail and dependent, mingled in his mind with Vivian's sweet voice, always reassuring him about the dedicated care given to the elderly man. How could it be true? Vivian, his Vivian, the woman he loved and who seemed so devoted to his father, capable of something cruel. The idea was a poison, beginning to corrode his faith, a painful question he had never imagined facing. He reached the door to Elias's room. A solid wooden door that Vivian had explained was ideal for ensuring his father's uninterrupted rest. But in that instant, it felt more like a barrier, an imposed isolation. He hesitated for a second, his hand trembling as he touched the cold doorknob. Corvus's cry still resonated in his ears, a dissonant melody that challenged his entire perception of reality. He opened the door, and the silence that greeted him was heavy, almost suffocating, laden with a strange melancholy. The room, once a refuge of light and color, now seemed shrouded in gloom. The heavy curtains were drawn, blocking out the morning sun. Elias lay in bed, huddled under a thin blanket, his skin pale and eyes closed. A tray with remnants of cold food lay untouched on the bedside table, a sign of neglect Arthur couldn't ignore. The air was stagnant, with a faint smell of mold and disuse. Arthur felt a tightening in his throat. This was not how Vivian described his father's environment. She spoke of fresh air, nutritious meals, a welcoming and lively atmosphere. Corvus, who had silently followed him, landed on the windowsill, flapping his wings agitatedly. His bright black eyes fixed on Arthur, then on Elias, and back on Arthur, as if trying to convey an urgent message without words. He let out a low caw, different from the previous cry, almost a lament, a sound of deep sadness. Arthur approached the bed, his heart heavy. Elias's hand was cold and slightly clammy. He called out to his father, but Elias didn't respond immediately. His breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible, a faint thread of life. A wave of panic began to rise in Arthur. He knelt beside the bed, touching his father's face. Elias slowly opened his eyes, confused, and a weak, toothless smile appeared. "Arthur, my son," he murmured, his voice hoarse and weak, barely audible. The sight of his father so debilitated, so different from the vibrant man he knew, made Corvus's words take on a terrifying weight. Father, suffering, Vivian! The phrase, once absurd, now seemed to echo with undeniable truth, a shocking revelation. Where was Vivian? She should be here, caring for him, as she always said. Arthur felt a pang of distrust, a strange and unwelcome feeling infiltrating his soul. He stood up, his mind in a whirl. He needed answers. He needed to understand what was happening. He looked at Corvus, who watched him with an intensity that seemed to transcend that of a mere animal. The raven, with its peculiar intelligence, seemed to be the only one to see beyond appearances. The sole silent witness to a truth Arthur, in his blindness, had refused to acknowledge. His father's life, and perhaps his own, now depended on him, unraveling the veil of lies that enveloped him, to bring forth the justice and love Elias deserved. Arthur stood up from the bedside, his body tense, his mind in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Elias's weak smile, his almost inaudible voice, the pallor of his skin, all screamed a truth he refused to accept. Vivian, his wife, the woman he thought he knew, couldn't possibly be behind such neglect. But the room, the smell of mold, the untouched food, and Corvus's desperate warning were undeniable evidence. The perfect life he had built was beginning to crumble. He knelt again with more purpose and took his father's hand. It was cold and a slight tremor ran through Elias's body. "Father, you need help. Where is Vivian? Shouldn't she be taking care of you?" Arthur asked, his voice choked with anguish. Elias merely shook his head, his eyes half closed. "Tired. So tired," he whispered, and turned his face to the wall, closing his eyes, sinking into a fragile sleep. Corvus, from the windowsill, let out a sharp caw, impatient with Arthur's slowness to grasp the gravity. He hopped onto the bedside table, nudging the tray of cold food with his beak, almost knocking it over. The gesture was deliberate, a call for attention Arthur could no longer ignore. It wasn't just Elias's health at stake, but Arthur's sanity in questioning his marriage. Arthur looked at the tray. There was a bowl of oatmeal, dry and with a thin layer of mold. Beside it, a glass of water that looked like it had been there for days, with dust on the surface. What Vivian claimed were nutritious and fresh meals was, in fact, cruel abandonment. A cold rage began to bubble within him, mixed with overwhelming guilt for not having noticed sooner. How could he, so astute in business, have been so blind in his own home? He rushed to the door, opening it with unusual force, the urgency to act taking over. He descended the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the silent vastness of the mansion. Where was Vivian? She always appeared for breakfast, with her radiant smile and sweet words. But the dining room was empty, the table set for one. The housekeeper, Mrs. Lucia, with a serious demeanor and watchful eyes, was tidying the room. "Mrs. Lucia, where is Vivian?" Arthur asked, his voice firmer than he expected, laden with authority. Mrs. Lucia paused, adjusting her apron. "Mrs. Vivian left early, Mr. Arthur. She said she had an important engagement and didn't want to be disturbed." An engagement. While his father was wasting away in his room, she was out, without warning, without concern. Distrust solidified into a painful and bitter certainty. Arthur returned to Elias's room, his heart heavy and his mind buzzing with a plan. He needed irrefutable proof to confront Vivian, but above all, he needed to care for his father immediately. He picked up the phone and called Dr. Almeida, the family doctor, requesting an emergency visit and emphasizing the gravity of the situation. While he waited, he sat beside Elias, holding his hand, stroking his thinning hair. Corvus, calmer now, landed on Arthur's shoulder, nudging his ear with his beak, a silent, loyal reminder that he wasn't alone. That moment of tenderness, amidst the pain and uncertainty, was a balm for Arthur. He promised himself to uncover the truth, not just for Elias, but for all the years of love and dedication his father had given him. Vivian's image, once perfect, now shattered, revealing a cruel face he never imagined existed. Corvus's unwavering loyalty was a beacon in the darkness, and Arthur knew he would need all his intelligence and courage to navigate this family storm. The battle to save Elias and unmask Vivian was just beginning, and he was ready to fight for justice and love. Arthur squeezed Elias's hand, feeling the fragility of the life that pulsed there. Every second felt like an eternity as he waited for Dr. Almeida. Corvus, on his shoulder, seemed to share the anxiety. His small movements and soft caws were a constant reminder of the urgency. The mansion, once a symbol of his happiness, now seemed a stage for a silent tragedy where truth hid in the shadows. Vivian's image, so loved and trusted, crumbled in his mind, replaced by a dark and unknown figure. The sound of the doorbell echoed, breaking the oppressive silence. Arthur rushed to open the door, finding Dr. Almeida, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and keen eyes. "Dr. Almeida, thank you for coming so quickly." "It's my father, Elias. He's not well," Arthur said, his voice tense, hurrying the doctor to the room. In the room, Dr. Almeida examined Elias with meticulous attention. He measured his blood pressure, listened to his heart, checked his reflexes. Arthur watched every movement, his heart in his throat, awaiting a verdict he dreaded hearing. Corvus, from the windowsill, observed the scene with unusual seriousness, as if understanding the gravity of the moment. After a few minutes that felt like hours, Dr. Almeida turned to Arthur, his expression grave. "Arthur, your father is severely dehydrated and malnourished. There are clear signs of neglect. The medication for his heart condition appears not to have been administered regularly, and his personal hygiene is compromised. He is very weak, and his immune system is debilitated. We need to act fast." The doctor's words fell upon Arthur like stones, crushing any lingering doubt. Neglect. The word echoed, cold and cruel, confirming what Corvus had tried to warn him about. A wave of fury and guilt washed over him. How could he have been so blind? How could he have allowed this to happen under his own roof, to his father? His eyes filled with tears, but he held them back, transforming the pain into an iron determination. "What do we need to do, Doctor?" "What does he need?" Arthur asked, his voice choked but firm. "First, we'll stabilize him here, intravenous hydration, light feeding and constant monitoring. We need nurses. And, Arthur, he needs love and attention. It's fundamental for his recovery," Dr. Almeida explained, already reaching for his phone to make the arrangements. While the doctor made the calls, Arthur knelt again beside Elias, holding his hand. "Father, I'm here. I'll take care of you, I promise." Elias opened his eyes briefly, a flicker of recognition and perhaps relief, before closing them again. Corvus flew from the windowsill and landed gently on the headboard of the bed, nudging Elias's forehead with his beak, an unexpected gesture of affection that deeply touched Arthur. In that instant, Arthur felt an unbreakable connection with his raven. Corvus was not just a pet, he was a guardian, a confidant, a herald of truth. The bird's loyalty contrasted brutally with Vivian's betrayal. Arthur knew the battle to expose his wife's cruelty would be difficult, but he was not alone. With Dr. Almeida caring for Elias and Corvus as his silent ally, Arthur felt a new strength. He would unravel every lie, every act of cruelty, and bring justice to his father. The mansion, once a home of illusions, would become the stage for a painful but absolutely necessary revelation. Arthur felt the strength of the promise he had made to his father, a promise that echoed in his heart and propelled him to act. While Dr. Almeida finalized the calls, arranging for the arrival of nurses and the necessary equipment for intravenous hydration, Arthur remained by Elias's side, observing each shallow breath, each weak movement. The mansion, once a sanctuary of luxury, now seemed a labyrinth of secrets and lies, and he was determined to find his way out. Soon, the bustle of the medical team filled Elias's room. Skilled nurses set up the medication and IV drip, and a heart monitor began to emit its rhythmic beeps, a sound that, despite being clinical, brought a subtle relief. Arthur watched everything attentively, absorbing instructions on continuous care, special diet, and the importance of keeping his father comfortable and stimulated. Corvus, from atop the bookshelf, seemed to supervise the scene, moving his head from side to side, his black eyes fixed on every detail. Vivian's absence was a glaring hole in the tapestry of that day. Arthur tried to call her, but the phone went straight to voicemail. The excuse of the important meeting sounded increasingly hollow and cruel. How could she be so oblivious, so distant, while his father fought for his life? The image of the devoted wife he loved so much shattered into 1,000 pieces, revealing a coldness he never imagined. The pain of betrayal began to settle in, heavy and suffocating. With Elias stabilized and under the nurse's care, Arthur felt it was time to begin his own investigation. He needed proof, not just for himself, but so that the truth would undeniably come to light. He started with Elias's room, now illuminated by the soft light the nurses had allowed in. He examined the bedside table again, finding not only the spoiled food, but also an empty medicine box with an expiration date months past. Beside it, a recent prescription with the renewal date for the medicines lay untouched. Corvus, who followed him closely, hopped onto the empty medicine box, pecking at it forcefully, as if wanting to tear it apart. Then he flew to the dresser drawer, which Arthur had ignored before. Upon opening it, Arthur found a pile of unopened correspondence, including medical bills and appointment reminders Elias should have had. Everything seemed to have been deliberately hidden. With each discovery, Arthur's anger grew, mixed with a profound sadness. How could the woman who shared his life be so monstrous? He remembered the times Vivian insisted on personally handling her father-in-law's medication, always with a smile and sweet words. It was all a charade, a mask of cruelty. In that moment, Arthur knew there was no turning back. The truth, however painful, needed to be revealed. He carefully put away the evidence, feeling the weight of responsibility. Elias needed justice, and Arthur would be the instrument for it. Corvus, perched on his shoulder, nudged his cheek with his beak, a gesture of support worth more than 1,000 words. The mansion, with its secrets now exposed, awaited Vivian's return, and Arthur was ready to confront her, armed with the truth and his raven's unwavering loyalty. The battle for Elias's dignity and his own peace was about to reach its most critical point. Arthur carefully put away the evidence, feeling the weight of responsibility and a sharp pain in his chest. The raven, perched on his shoulder, nudged his cheek with its beak, a gesture of support worth more than 1,000 words. The mansion, with its secrets now exposed, awaited Vivian's return, and Arthur was ready to confront her, armed with the truth and his raven's unwavering loyalty. The battle for Elias's dignity and his own peace was about to reach its most critical point. He stepped away from the dresser, his eyes sweeping Elias's room as if searching for more pieces of the cruel puzzle. Every object now seemed to hold a hidden story, a silent testimony to the neglect. Arthur noticed a small diary on the bedside table, almost hidden beneath a delicate handkerchief. With trembling hands, he opened it. The yellowed pages, written in a weak and shaky hand, revealed Elias's lonely thoughts, his complaints about the lack of food, constant thirst, and overwhelming loneliness. There were mentions of Vivian, who promised to come but didn't, and the chest pain that doesn't go away because the medicines are gone. Arthur's heart tightened, and a solitary tear rolled down his face, a mixture of sadness and fury. Corvus, sensing Arthur's anguish, flew to the diary, landing gently on the open page. He pecked at the words delicately, as if he too could read the pain contained within. That diary was Elias's voice, silenced by Vivian, now finally heard by his son. Arthur felt a wave of cold, controlled fury. It wasn't just neglect, it was premeditated cruelty, a plan to isolate and harm his father. Vivian had built an invisible prison for Elias, depriving him of everything, while he, Arthur, lived in a bubble of illusion, blinded by his wife's cunning manipulation. He carefully put away the diary along with the other items, feeling the urgency to act. The mansion, once a refuge of love and comfort, was now a battlefield where truth would fight against lies. Arthur needed a plan, a strategy to unmask Vivian without giving her a chance to escape or manipulate the situation again. He knew she was cunning, capable of weaving webs of lies with frightening ease, always with a smile on her face. The nurses continued to care for Elias with dedication, their presence a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation, but also of the hope for recovery. Arthur observed his father, who now seemed a little more peaceful, breathing more regularly under the effect of the care. The sight of his father recovering, even if slowly, reinforced his unwavering determination. Elias deserved peace, dignity, and love, and Arthur would do everything to ensure it, no matter the personal cost. He withdrew from the room, leaving Elias under professional care, but with the silent promise to return soon. Corvus followed him, flying by his side, a winged and faithful guardian, his only true confidant in that moment. Arthur needed a place to think, to organize his evidence and his thoughts amidst the whirlwind of emotions. He headed to his office, an environment that had always been his sanctuary for important decisions, now transformed into an operations center for a personal and painful investigation. In the office, Arthur spread the evidence on the polished mahogany desk, the empty and expired medicine box, the untouched prescription, the ignored medical bills, and most devastating of all, Elias's diary. Each item was a nail in the coffin of the perfect image he had of Vivian. He felt a lump in his throat, a mixture of deep sadness and righteous anger burning in his chest. How could the woman he loved be so inhumane, so cruel to his own father? He thought of Corvus's words. Father, suffering, Vivian. The raven had been the only one to see the truth, the only one brave enough to cry out what Arthur refused to see in his blindness. That bird, his loyal and extraordinary companion, had saved his father. Arthur stroked Corvus's head, who landed on the edge of the desk, observing the documents with his intelligent, piercing eyes. The next step would be to confront Vivian, but it wouldn't be an impulsive confrontation driven by anger. It would be calculated, with every piece of evidence in its proper place, every lie exposed irrefutably. He needed to ensure she had no escape, that her manipulation would come to an end. Justice for Elias would be complete, and Vivian's betrayal would be revealed to all, leaving no room for doubt. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in orange hues, but the darkness that had fallen over Arthur's life was about to be dispelled by the relentless light of truth. He was ready for the final battle. Arthur was ready for the final battle, but the darkness outside was nothing compared to the one that had settled in his heart. In the office, he mentally reviewed each piece of evidence, every word from Elias's diary, every memory of Vivian's lies. Corvus, perched on his shoulder, seemed to read his thoughts, letting out a soft caw now and then, as a reminder of his unwavering presence and support. Arthur took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions that assailed him: anger, sadness, guilt, and an iron determination. The doorbell rang, echoing through the silent mansion. It was Vivian. Arthur felt a chill but composed himself. It was time. He walked to the main door, Corvus flying ahead of him, landing high on the living room chandelier like a sentinel. Vivian entered, her usual radiant smile, her eyes shining with a false innocence that Arthur now saw clearly. She wore an elegant silk dress and carried a small designer handbag. "Arthur, my love, what a surprise to find you home so early. I had an exhausting day with important meetings, but I managed to resolve everything. How is father? Have the nurses arrived yet?" "I called Dr. Almeida, and he reassured me, said everything was under control," Vivian said, approaching to kiss him, but Arthur subtly recoiled. Her voice was sweet, melodic, but to Arthur it sounded like poison. He watched her, his mind working fast. She already knew about the nurses. She had already spoken with Dr. Almeida. Her manipulation was deeper than he imagined. "Yes, Vivian, the nurses have arrived. Dr. Almeida was here, and he told me some disturbing things about father," Arthur replied, his voice controlled, almost cold. Vivian frowned, a faint air of forced concern on her face. "Disturbing? Oh, Arthur, you know how fragile father is. Age comes for us all, my dear. I've been doing my best, you know, but he's been resisting care, refusing to eat, and his memory, well, it's failing. It's old age, Arthur. A pity, but that's life, she said with a dramatic sigh, and then with an even more forced smile added, actually, I was thinking about something today. Perhaps it's time we considered a specialized clinic for father, a place where he can have 24-hour attention, with professionals who understand the needs of elderly people with dementia. It would be best for him, don't you think? So he doesn't feel like a burden to us. Vivian's words fell upon Arthur like an unexpected blow. A clinic. Dementia. A burden. Unday, the audacity of her manipulation was shocking. She not only neglected Elias, but now tried to justify the abandonment, rewrite reality, and worse, planned to get rid of him for good, all under the guise of false care. His eyes widened slightly, not in surprise, but from a new and deeper understanding of her cruelty. Corvus, from the chandelier, cawed loudly, a shrill sound that seemed to tear through the charged atmosphere. It was the turning point, the revelation that Vivian's malice knew no bounds, and that Arthur would need more than proof to bring down that facade of perfection. He would need a strategy as cunning as hers. Arthur fixed his eyes on Vivian, the mask of false care she wore crumbling before his new perception. The proposal of a clinic, the suggestion of dementia for his father, the coldness in her words, everything aligned perfectly with the cruelty Corvus had tried to reveal. Rage simmered, but Arthur contained it with monumental effort. He knew that a direct, impulsive confrontation would be exactly what Vivian expected, giving her a chance to defend herself with more lies and manipulations. He needed to be as cunning as her, or even more so. "A clinic, you say?" Arthur repeated, his voice surprisingly calm, almost thoughtful. He observed the slight satisfaction that flickered in Vivian's eyes before she disguised it. "It's an idea to consider. But before making any such drastic decision, I need to be sure we're doing what's best for father. Dr. Almeida mentioned that the dehydration and malnutrition are severe. That doesn't sound like dementia, Vivian, but rather neglect." The word neglect hung in the air, an icy thread between them. Vivian's smile wavered for an instant, but she quickly composed herself, adopting an expression of offense. "Neglect, Arthur? How can you suggest such a thing? I'm the only one who's been here, caring for him day and night while you're immersed in your business. I've sacrificed myself for your family." Her voice rose a pitch, laden with forced indignation. Her eyes, once bright, now seemed hard. Corvus, from the chandelier, let out a low caw, almost a growl, shaking his head as if disapproving of Vivian's performance. Arthur felt a chill. He needed to remain calm. "I know how dedicated you are, Vivian," Arthur said, his voice still controlled, though each word was an effort. "But the evidence suggests otherwise. Dr. Almeida was very clear, and I found some things in Father's room." He paused, observing her reaction. A shadow of panic crossed Vivian's face, but she quickly hid it. "Things? What things, Arthur? I don't understand." "Are you accusing me of something?" she asked, her voice now lower with a hint of veiled threat. She clutched her purse to her chest, a defensive gesture. Arthur wouldn't reveal the diary yet. It wasn't the moment. He needed her to feel secure enough to make more mistakes. Just some inconsistencies, expired medications, unpaid bills, things that worry me. But as you said, perhaps it's just age. In any case, I want to be absolutely sure before any decision. I'll spend the next few days at home, closely monitoring Father's care. I want to better understand what's happening. Arthur's suggestion to stay home seemed to disarm Vivian for a moment. The panic in her eyes was replaced by ill-concealed irritation. She clearly hadn't expected him to get so directly involved. "But Arthur, your business. You can't just abandon everything for this. We have commitments, investors, and I already have everything under control with the nurses. There's no need for you to worry so much. It's not a concern, Vivian. It's a necessity. My father is my priority now, Arthur stated, his voice gaining a firmness that left no room for discussion. He knew this would be the first stage of his plan, to observe, document, and unmask every one of her lies in real time. He needed more proof, undeniable evidence that she couldn't refute. Corvus flew from the chandelier and landed on Arthur's shoulder, nudging his ear with his beak, a silent sign of approval. Arthur felt the strength of that support, the certainty that he was not alone. The battle was far from over, but Arthur had taken the first crucial step. He had refused to be deceived, and the truth, however painful, was beginning to illuminate the dark corners of his mansion. He was ready to observe, to learn, and finally, to act. Arthur was ready to observe, to learn, and finally, to act. The following days transformed the mansion into a silent stage for a painful investigation. Arthur, once absorbed in his technological empire, dedicated himself entirely to monitoring every detail of Elias's care and, more importantly, every move Vivian made. He observed how she interacted with the nurses, always with a forced smile and questions that seemed innocent, but carried a hidden intention of control. Vivian praised the team's dedication, but subtly questioned the need for so much care, suggesting that Elias wasn't that fragile, or that he needed more space. Corvus, his faithful companion, became his silent shadow. The raven perched on Arthur's shoulder as he read the nurses' reports, or watched Vivian from afar, emitting a low, significant caw whenever she approached Elias's room with an expression less than sincere. Arthur began to notice the patterns. Vivian always tried to intercept the special meals prepared for Elias, offering help to deliver them, but invariably the food arrived cold or in smaller portions. She also insisted on administering the medication, even with the nurses present, claiming that father only took it from her, which Arthur knew to be a lie, as Elias now accepted the medicine without resistance from the team. Each day, Elias showed remarkable improvement. Proper hydration and nutrition, combined with regular medication and the nurse's care, brought a faint sparkle back to his eyes. He began to eat on his own, to converse in short sentences, and even to smile at Arthur, a weak smile but full of gratitude. The sight of his father regaining dignity and strength only fueled Arthur's fury and determination. It wasn't dementia, as Vivian claimed, it was neglect, pure and simple, and he had the proof. One afternoon, Arthur witnessed a scene that chilled his blood. Vivian, believing herself alone, entered Elias's room and with a look of contempt pushed the food tray away from him, whispering, "Don't think you'll recover so easily, old man. You're a nuisance, and you'll be out of here soon." Elias cowered in bed, his eyes filled with fear. Corvus, perched on the window, cawed loudly, drawing Vivian's attention. She turned, startled, quickly composing herself upon seeing Arthur standing at the door. "Arthur, my love, I was just adjusting the tray for father. He's so stubborn today, he doesn't want to eat," she said with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Arthur felt the weight of betrayal crush him, but he remained calm. "I saw Vivian, and I heard. Don't worry, I'll take care of the tray. Why don't you go rest for a bit?" he replied, his voice cold as ice, without any trace of his former affection. Vivian paled, realizing her mask was falling. She left the room hastily, her footsteps echoing her panic. Arthur approached Elias, who looked at him with a mixture of relief and shame. "Father, you are not a nuisance. You are loved," Arthur whispered, holding his father's hand. In that moment, Arthur knew he had enough proof. Not just the documents, but the raw, undeniable truth his own eyes had witnessed. Vivian's charade had come to an end. He felt a renewed strength, an unwavering clarity. Justice for Elias would not just be a promise, it would be a reality. He was ready for the final confrontation, and this time Vivian would have nowhere to run. He called her to the office, where the evidence was laid out on the mahogany desk under the cold light of the lamp. Vivian entered, her usual smile now a tense line, her eyes restless. Corvus landed on the chandelier, observing the scene with an almost human intensity. "Sit down, Vivian," Arthur said, his voice calm, but with an authority she had never heard. She obeyed, her eyes fixed on the objects on the table. "What is all this, Arthur? Why this formality?" she asked, trying to sound defiant, but uncertainty trembled in her voice. Arthur picked up the empty, expired medicine box. "This, Vivian, is my father's medication, expired months ago. And this," he showed the untouched prescription, "is the prescription for the new medicines you insisted on personally taking care of." Vivian's face lost its color. I must have made a mistake. So many things to do, Arthur, you know. I'm just one person." Arthur ignored the excuse. "And these are the medical bills and appointment reminders you hid. My father was being deprived of essential care, Vivian. He was dying of thirst and hunger while you claimed he refused to eat." He watched her, anger contained in every fiber of his being. "But what shocked me most," Arthur continued, picking up Elias's small diary, "was this." He opened the diary and read aloud, his voice choked with emotion. "Vivian promised to come, but didn't. The chest pain that doesn't go away because the medicines are gone. I feel alone, a nuisance." The words echoed in the silence of the office. Vivian was pale, her eyes wide, her mouth open in a silent protest. She tried to stand, but Arthur stopped her with a look. "I saw you push his food tray today, Vivian. I heard you call him a nuisance. I heard Corvus scream the truth. But I was blind. You are not the devoted wife I thought. You are a cruel woman who planned to get rid of my father to gain access to my fortune." Arthur's words, cold and cutting, struck Vivian like razors. She collapsed into the chair, false tears welling in her eyes. But Arthur was unmoved. "There are no more excuses, Vivian. The charade is over. You are exposed. My father is safe, and you will no longer be a part of our lives." Corvus cawed loudly, a sound of triumph, as Vivian, her face disfigured by defeat, realized that all was lost. Corvus cawed loudly, a sound of triumph, as Vivian, her face disfigured by defeat, realized that all was lost. Vivian staggered, her hands trembling, leaning on the table. Her eyes, once calculating, now reflected a desperate emptiness. The mask of perfection crumbled, revealing a frightened woman with no way out. "Arthur, please, you can't do this to me," she stammered, her voice choked. I made mistakes, but it was under pressure for wanting the best for us." She reached out, in a futile attempt to reverse the truth. Arthur, however, remained motionless, his gaze cold and unwavering. The pain of betrayal pierced him, but the clarity of justice was stronger. "There is no us, Vivian. There never was. What you did to my father has no justification. It's calculated cruelty for your own benefit. You deprived him of dignity, care, love. That is unforgivable." Corvus, on the chandelier, tilted his head, observing her with intelligence. Vivian's tears flowed, but they were tears of desperation at being caught, not of remorse. "But what about our marriage and everything we built?" she insisted, her voice rising. "Are you going to throw everything away because of a sick old man? Because of a talking bird?" She pointed at Corvus, rage overcoming panic, a last flicker of her true nature. "My father is not a sick old man, Vivian. He is a man you tried to destroy. And Corvus, he was the only voice of truth when I was blind. Arthur replied, his voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. He picked up the documents. "My lawyers have been notified. You will have to leave this house today. Your access to my accounts and assets has been revoked. There will be no more us." The decision was irreversible. Vivian felt the ground disappear beneath her. The reality of her ruin descended. It wasn't just the marriage. It was the luxurious life, the fortune she coveted. Everything was crumbling. She tried to argue, plead, threaten, but her words were lost in uncontrolled sobbing, having no effect on Arthur. He called security. 2 discreet men appeared. "Escort Mrs. Vivian off the property. Take only her personal belongings and do not return." Her face swollen and red, Vivian was escorted out, her footsteps echoing the end of an era. The main door closed, and a heavy yet liberating silence settled over the mansion. Arthur watched her leave, without remorse. The pain in his heart was immense, but it was grief for a love that never existed. He had done what was right, and peace began to settle in. Corvus flew from the chandelier and landed on Arthur's shoulder, nudging his cheek with his beak. The mansion, once a stage of falsehood, now breathed a lighter air. The darkness Vivian had brought was dissipating, giving way to new hope. Arthur knew the path would be long, but with truth and love as his guides and Corvus by his side, he was ready. Justice had been served, and healing could finally begin. The silence that followed Vivian's departure was not empty, but filled with a quietness Arthur hadn't felt in years. It was the quietness of truth, of justice finally achieved, but also of the pain of a love that had revealed itself to be a cruel illusion. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of betrayal and the responsibility for his blindness. Corvus, still on his shoulder, nudged his cheek with his beak, a silent comfort. Arthur stroked the raven's dark feathers, grateful. His first impulse was to rush to Elias's room. He found his father asleep, his breathing calmer, and his face, though frail, seemed serene. Arthur sat on the edge of the bed, watching him. The sight of his father, vulnerable yet safe, brought a wave of emotion. He held Elias's wrinkled hand, feeling the warmth of life. "Father," he whispered, his voice choked. "Forgive me for not seeing it sooner, for allowing this." A solitary tear rolled down his face, a mixture of sadness and relief. Corvus flew from the window and landed on the headboard of the bed, observing Elias with his intelligent eyes. The raven seemed to sense the relief from the threat. Arthur decided that the mansion, once a stage of falsehood, would now be a sanctuary of love and care. He called the nurses and instructed them to ensure Elias had everything: nutritious meals, medication on time, and above all, companionship and affection. He himself promised to dedicate more time to his father, reading, talking, reminiscing about old times. In the days that followed, the transformation in the mansion was palpable. The heavy atmosphere gave way to a comforting lightness. Elias's laughter, once rare, began to echo. He regained strength each day, and with it, his memory and vivacity. Arthur spent hours by his father's side, listening to his stories, feeling the connection that had been brutally interrupted by Vivian's manipulation. Elias, in turn, looked at Arthur with deep gratitude, his blue eyes conveying unconditional love. Corvus was a constant presence, a silent link between father and son. He perched on Elias's shoulder, allowing the old man to stroke his feathers. And Cord, when Arthur recounted childhood anecdotes, the raven was no longer just a pet. He was a family member, the guardian of truth, the catalyst for profound change. Arthur realized that true wealth was not in his technological empire, but in the bonds of affection and integrity. He had learned the most valuable lesson: the importance of seeing beyond appearances and protecting those we love. The mansion now was a home of truth. The windows, once closed to the truth, now opened to a future of hope and reconstruction. Arthur knew that healing the wounds would be long, but the presence of Elias, strong and recovered, and Corvus's unwavering loyalty were proof that love and justice would always find their way. He had rescued his father, and in doing so, had rescued himself. Life, in its purest essence, was reborn in those corridors, a testament to the strength of family and truth. Life, in its purest essence, was reborn in those corridors, a testament to the strength of family and truth. Arthur, his heart lighter than it had been in years, dedicated himself to rebuilding not only Elias's health, but also the mansion's atmosphere. The first step was a complete restructuring of the support staff. He hired nurses and caregivers with impeccable references and, more importantly, with kind eyes and sincere smiles. The presence of truly compassionate people transformed the environment, dispelling the shadow of distrust Vivian had imposed. Elias, once reclusive and fearful, began to flourish. His eyes, which had once carried a veil of sadness, now shone with renewed light. He laughed more, talked more, and even showed an appetite that surprised everyone. Meals, once solitary and forced, became moments of togetherness, with Arthur making a point of sitting at the table with his father whenever possible, sharing stories and laughter. Corvus, the faithful guardian, continued to be a constant and comforting presence. He perched on Elias's shoulder as Arthur's father read the newspaper or watched the two men playing chess in the garden. His caws, once warnings of danger, were now sounds of contentment, as if the raven too celebrated the peace that had returned. Elias, who at first was startled by the bird's presence, now reached out to stroke its dark feathers, and Corvus responded with an affectionate nudge of his beak, proof of the deep connection that had formed between them. Arthur watched these interactions with a lump in his throat, remembering how Corvus had been the only voice of reason amidst his blindness. The gratitude he felt for the raven was immense, an unconditional love for the one who had guided him back to the truth. Arthur also began to re-evaluate his own life. His technological empire, once the center of his universe, now took on a new meaning. He delegated more responsibilities, allowing himself more time for what truly mattered: family. Mornings were dedicated to business, but afternoons were sacredly reserved for Elias. They strolled through the gardens, listened to classical music, or simply enjoyed the silence, each other's presence. Arthur read to his father, and Elias, with an increasingly sharp memory, recounted anecdotes from Arthur's childhood, filling gaps and strengthening the bond that life and malice had tried to break. The mansion, once a symbol of his fortune and his loneliness, transformed into a true home, a refuge of love and security. Healing was a gradual process, but Arthur felt he was on the right path. He had learned the bitterest lesson about the true face of betrayal, but also the sweetest about unwavering loyalty and the power of family love. Vivian's image, her face disfigured by defeat, still surfaced in his thoughts, but no longer had the power to shake him. Justice had been served, and peace, finally, had found its place. He knew the future would bring its own challenges, but with Elias recovered and Corvus by his side, Arthur was ready to face them. Life, in its fullness, was a gift he now valued above all else, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the strength that resides in truth and the purest unconditional love. Life, in its fullness, was a gift he now valued above all else, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the strength that resides in truth and the purest unconditional love. The months that followed Vivian's departure were a period of profound healing and rediscovery for Arthur and Elias. The mansion, once a stage of falsehoods and silent suffering, transformed into a true sanctuary of love and laughter. Elias, with the constant care and unwavering affection of Arthur and the new team, flourished in a way no one would have dared to expect. His white hair, once disheveled and lifeless, was carefully combed. His blue eyes, which for so long had carried the shadow of fear and sadness, now shone with a contagious vivacity. He not only recovered his physical health, but also his joy for life. Elias returned to painting, a pastime Arthur barely remembered his father possessed, and colorful canvases began to adorn the living room walls, each brushstroke a testament to his renewed soul. He told stories of his youth, with vivid details and a humor Arthur never imagined his father possessed. Dinner-table conversations stretched for hours, filled with laughter and precious memories. Arthur, in turn, found a peace that money and success could never buy. He continued to manage his technological empire, but with a renewed perspective. Business meetings, once exhausting, were now interspersed with strolls in the garden with Elias or shared reading moments in the library. He learned to slow down, to appreciate the small moments, to value his father's presence above any material achievement. Elias's embrace, a gesture that had become rare, was now a daily ritual, filled with a love that healed the deepest wounds. Corvus, the loyal raven, remained the silent guardian and the most peculiar member of the family. He frequently perched on Elias's shoulder as the old man painted, observing the brush's movement with an almost human curiosity. His caws, once warnings of danger, were now sounds of contentment, a musical accompaniment to the laughter and conversations that filled the mansion. Elias, who was once startled by the raven, now reached out to stroke its dark feathers, and Corvus responded with an affectionate nudge of his beak, proof of the deep connection that had formed between them. The story of Arthur, Elias, and Corvus became a powerful reminder that true wealth resides in bonds of affection, integrity, and the courage to face the truth however painful it may be. The mansion, once a symbol of empty luxury, was now a home filled with unconditional love, where justice had prevailed and the human spirit had triumphed over adversity. Arthur had rescued his father from the brink of death, and in doing so, had rescued himself from a life of illusions. He looked at Elias, who smiled as Corvus landed on his head, and felt his heart overflow with gratitude. The journey had been arduous, marked by betrayal and pain. But the end was one of hope and renewal. Arthur knew that life would always bring new challenges, but with the wisdom gained, his father's love, and his raven's unwavering loyalty, he was ready for anything. Life, in its purest essence, was reborn in those corridors, a testament to the strength of family and the truth that always finds its way, illuminating even the darkest corners of the soul. Arthur now understood the depth of those words as never before. The mansion, once a stage of intrigues and silences, transformed into a vibrant home where Elias's laughter was the sweetest melody. His father, whom Arthur had feared losing to indifference and cruelty, was not only recovered but reborn. Elias, with neatly trimmed white hair and a jovial sparkle in his blue eyes, spent his mornings in the garden cultivating rare orchids, a passion Vivian had suppressed. His hands, once trembling, now held the watering can firmly, and his face lit up at the sight of the flowers. Arthur watched these scenes with warmth in his chest. He restructured his schedule, dedicating afternoons to his father. Together they explored the vast gardens, read books, or simply sat on the veranda, enjoying the breeze and the silence. Elias recounted stories of his youth, of his dreams, and Arthur listened attentively. Each anecdote reinforced the new family fabric. Corvus, the winged guardian, was a constant presence. He perched on Elias's shoulder as the old man painted, or on Arthur's arm during their conversations. His caws, once full of urgency, were now soft, almost melodious, as if the raven himself celebrated the restored peace and harmony. Elias, who was initially startled by the bird, now called him by name, and Corvus responded with an affectionate nudge of his beak, proof of their blossoming friendship. Arthur also sought a new form of altruism. Inspired by Elias's resilience and Corvus's loyalty, He founded an institution to support the elderly, offering care, companionship, and dignity to those who, like his father, might be vulnerable. He used his fortune and technological influence to create monitoring and communication systems that ensured the safety and well-being of those assisted with a human touch. It was his way of transforming the pain of betrayal into a legacy of compassion and social justice. Vivian's image, though still surfacing occasionally, no longer carried the same weight. It was a bitter memory, but a constant reminder of truth and vigilance. Arthur had learned that true wealth was not in material possessions, but in the integrity of character, the purity of family bonds, and the courage to defend those we love. One day, as Arthur and Elias played chess in the garden, Corvus landed on the board, knocking over a piece. Elias laughed, a vibrant, life-filled sound. "Ah, Corvus, you always want to participate, don't you?" he said, stroking the bird. Arthur smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He felt he had rescued his father and himself from a life of appearances. The mansion, once a fragile crystal castle, was now a solid stone home, built on the foundations of truth and unconditional love. The future, Arthur knew, would bring challenges. But he was ready, with Elias by his side, strong and happy, and Corvus, the guardian of truth. He had everything that truly mattered. Life, in its purest essence, flourished in those corridors, a testament to the strength of family, resilience, and human connection that even in darkness would always find the light. The story of Arthur and Elias was a hymn to hope. With love and courage, wounds heal, and life rebuilds itself stronger and truer.